This is going to be the third and final part of the vlog where I am reading a book based on each of my big six of my astrology chart. If you want to hear more about that concept or project and more about the other books that I read more towards the beginning, you'll definitely want to check out the first two parts. So I've got to think about what I even have left. So we've done Pisces Sun, Aquarius Moon, Pisces Mercury, Cancer and Mars. So I think that leaves me with Cancer Rising and Aries Venus. So I've got to pick which one of those I want to read next. And I think I'm going to go with my Aries and Venus. And for this, I'm going to be reading Cat on a Hot Tin Roof by Tennessee Williams. Tennessee Williams is an Aries, so that's why I'm picking this. I think he's an Aries Sun as well as an Aries Venus. And I've been meaning to read Tennessee Williams. Brent really has enjoyed Tennessee Williams, and I asked them which play I should read, considering the fact that this is for Venus, Venus sign, and they said Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. So that's what I'm going with. So I think that the way that Venus and Aries is presented, or the ways that Aries energy, generally speaking, is probably going to present itself in this is very different than the way that it's presented in my chart. And this is because the Aries and Libra energies in my chart are a little fucked up. Venus and Aries are intercepted in my chart, which basically means they're stuck inside of a house. So they're not technically the leader of the house on either side. They don't rule either houses in my chart. But rather they're stuck in it. So it's really hard to actually show, and when I actually get into reading what Venus and Aries even means, I'll talk a little bit more about that too. I think that's probably going to be in on a different day, just because I think there are some other things I want to catch up on before I read Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And I'm still undecided whether or not I want to go back to watching Project Runway since I finished this book. So the next time you see me talking, I'll go over Venus and Aries and Tennessee Williams' birth chart. You like the dinosaur blankie. Making biscuits on my arm. What a sweet kitten. Right. I finished Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. I thought that I would read a little bit of it and then fall asleep, but of course, no. But I thought it was really interesting. It's a really cool kind of study into the dynamic of a family, which is very similar to Generations was also about a family. These are very different things. I think they're saying very different things, but that's an interesting similarity. This whole thing takes place over the course of the night and is basically a conversation between various family members during the basically father/grandfather, head of the family's birthday. And it's very much about the lies that are told, basically to get through kind of living a life that you don't want. Which I haven't talked about Aries yet, or kind of the particulars of my Aries placement, but when I do talk about it, I think it'll kind of explain more, but this fit even better than I was expecting. Generally speaking, the Aries bit makes sense because there are a lot of characters that are just like just doing what they want to, kind of without regard for other people in these different ways. But it's also interesting that you have the women who are also kind of acting in order to keep the family together on this other side, but it's also got a sort of erratic nature to it, just because they're trying to, or at least in the case of most of them, at least Big Mama, and who's like the mother slash grandmother figure and the main character's wife, they're kind of trying to keep something together that doesn't need to stay together, which is interesting just because that's like it makes me think of like a really like bad manifestation of like a Libra, especially thinking in terms of Aries, because the opposite of Aries on the kind of astrology wheel is Libra. But anyways, I think I'm just babbling, and I'm also afraid none of this is going to make sense without the kind of explanation. A lot of these people's connections is basically just a bunch of lies in a trench coat, or just there's also the discussion of like talking around things rather than actually getting at them, which is also interesting just because Aries is seen as something that's very direct. But I think there's something to be said about kind of the stubbornness, refusing to talk about something. I have a lot of thoughts. Excuse me. Oh, she does too. I have a lot of thoughts about this. In particular, how it relates to Aries, Venus in Aries in particular, and having funky energy around Aries. Thanks for that, ma'am. But all of that requires me talking about it more in depth, which I am not going to do at 1:30 a.m. when I have to be up at 8. So I will be back with a more clear explanation very shortly. So it is the next day, or really it's just a lot later in the day because I finished that really early in the morning. I'm going to talk a bit about what Venus in Aries looks like so I can talk a little bit more about the book. I rambled a bit last night, so I'm not sure what all actually makes sense and what doesn't. So I'm going to talk about the placement, try to talk about the author's chart, and then maybe revisit the book a little bit more because it fits really well in ways that I wasn't expecting, because I have a difficulty with my Venus in Aries, for reasons that will be explained when I talk about the placement. So I didn't think that something by someone who's an Aries sun would really relate, but it really does. It really does. So to start off with, Aries is a cardinal fire sign. We've talked about cardinal signs because Cancer is a cardinal sign. So they are the ones that start the seasons. They are more about action, starting something, leadership. Fire signs we have not talked about because this is my only fire sign in my whole chart. Fire signs signify energy, aggressiveness, enthusiasm, and impulsiveness. Aries in particular is at the very beginning of the astrological wheel. And so it's kind of like the youngest. So the impulsivity, I think, tends to be a little bit more emphasized there. Venus is about love, romance, affection, but it's also about beauty and art. So aesthetics. This is ruled by Taurus and Libra. Both of those are Venusian, which means that there are 2 different placements that are its fall. We've talked about a little bit about fall, more about detriment, because both my Mercury and Mars were in detriment. And my Aries is in its fall. With detriment, that means that they're opposite the planets that exalts them. When they're in their detriment, that means that it is opposite the sign that exalts them, which is the best placement or the most like comfortable placement for the planet. When they're in it, when the planet is in its fall, it means that it is opposite the astrological sign that rules it. So that means that both Scorpio and Aries Venuses would be in fall. So that basically means that the energy of the planet is really watered down. It's difficult because it's opposite, so there's kind of a tension because it wants to be in the other place. So what I've written for Venus and Aries. Venus and Aries are passionate and ambitious. They can be impulsive and fall and act quickly, but need mental compatibility to keep a long-term relationship. They can seem intimidating or overly confident, but their biggest lesson to learn is patience with their own progression, because they want it to be fast. They want it to be now. At a low, they can be selfish and impulsive. That's Venus and Aries. Lovely. In my particular chart, my Venus is in the 10th house. And the 10th house is your midheaven, which is one of the not important houses. I mean, they all could be important, and depending on your chart, kind of depends on what is important for you. But it's kind of like how your rising sign, your first house, is a big one that people know about because it directly impacts how people see you. The other kind of main 4 points also tend to be ones to look at in your chart. One of those is the MC or the midheaven, the 10th house, which signifies your career or public image. My Venus is in that house. So that would mean that love or beauty is somehow impacted by that house. I think for some people that can mean that you can find someone through work or find someone who will help you with your work. Maybe art is central to your work. Not just work, but also public image. I think it's easier to find stuff that relates to how kind of society works now. And of course, I think there's an overemphasis in career and money. And a lot of how they're laid out. And in Signs and Skymates, it also kind of sees, so 10th house, it's career and reputation, which we've already talked about. But she also talks about it as the house of self-determination or self-actualization. Quote, it's the house that reflects who our most attuned self has the potential to be, which is why the 10th house also rules the midheaven, reminding us of who we can be if we dare to fly high. So, 10th house Venus can use charm and diplomacy to further your interests. You may be involved in artistic or cultural work or in creating beauty. You're likely to be popular with the public. Partnership, possibly marriage, could enhance your career. Bad point. Risk of scandal or disappointment through or because of women. Women specifically. Interesting choices. So that's kind of a breakdown of that. This is extra, I think, of all of my placements, this is the one that I have the hardest time grasping and really understanding. I think the more I look at it and the more that I look at like kind of my development, I can see parts of it, especially as it pertains to Aries, less the 10th house, but that's neither here nor there. And that's because in my chart, Aries is intercepted. Now, if you use like whole house astrology, you don't really deal with interceptions because the beginning of the house, like, it is where it is. There's no degrees. Whereas in, I think it's Placidius, I only ever see it written down. So I hope that's how you pronounce it. Where the houses begin rulership is at a particular degree. And for most people, you still have a different zodiac sign. However, sometimes your stuff can be a little screwy and you get things that are stuck inside of the houses. And I'll put mine up for to kind of show. So my and anytime you have an intercepted house, so one that's stuck, the one opposite it is also stuck, just because of how circles work, and symmetry and all that. So my Aries and Libra are intercepted, which means that my Venus and my Jupiter, which I'm not really going to talk about, but both of those things are intercepted. So these energies may be harder to tap into, or big lessons in your life will be about tapping into these energies. And I gotta say, that's really true. I was hoping to read a blog entry that I found a while back that described it in a way that really resonated with me, but of course I can't find it now. But the way that it, I think, or one of the ways that the interception of Aries and Libra manifests for me, it's really hard to access the sort of like immediate acting for yourself or even speaking up for yourself at all. Instead, the tendency is to blend in, basically not rock the boat. So like the most like the worst interpretation of Libra, basically, because both of those things are impacted. Both your ability to act for yourself and kind of the blending in with other people is affected too. I think that can manifest for different people in different ways, but for me, basically chronic people pleasing and shoving down parts of myself for what I perceive as the benefit of others, but doesn't really end up benefiting anyone. So it's really hard to access both of those things. And often with intersections, there's like a journey involved in kind of being able to access that, or there's a big lesson that you have to learn. And I don't have the notes immediately available to me, and even if I did, I don't know if they'd be intelligible enough to just read. It would be an extra thing for me to have to interpret, I think. But one of the ways that I've actually read my Aries, specifically my like intercepted Venus, is through the long trek that it has taken for me to figure out my sexuality. I didn't let myself really acknowledge my queerness until my early 20s. I think I was like 21 or so by the time I came out to anybody. And it took me a long time to figure out who I was and wasn't attracted to. And I'm still back and forth about certain language choices. I think, I don't remember if I've privated it at this point, but at around the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, I was kind of figuring out just how much of past relationships with men were very much societal pressure, internal pressure. Again, internal pressure that really kind of helped nobody, that I was tapping in from assumptions that I made about what other people wanted. I don't know why I'm circling here. I guess that's where Libra is if Aries is up here. So a sort of element of compulsory heterosexuality was in those relationships. And kind of figuring that out, and being able to tap into that, like what was actually going on in my Venus. Kind of in both of those situations, both the initial coming out and then kind of like reinterpretation, voicing what I actually want. That's one way that I've read it, and seen it. I don't know. The more I think about it, the more individual instances it might be able to explain. But it's definitely been a journey, that sort of component to it. So I don't know. Intercepted placements are very interesting to me. Thinking about the ways that they could potentially like manifest and what that could say about the people or how they reflect on it. I think could be interesting or helpful, but I'm hoping to find more on that. I've been like a lot of the resources that I found that really focus in on it much at all are mostly like blog posts and stuff. But I've talked about this for far too long. So we can move on to looking at Tennessee Williams' birth chart. So when I chose Lucille Clifton because of her chart, I think her Mars was in Cancer as well as her sun being in Cancer. With Tennessee Williams, his Venus is not in Aries, but his sun is in Aries and his Mercury was in Aries. So there's a lot of energy there. And I went with it. So Tennessee Williams was in Aries sun, a Capricorn rising, and an Aquarius moon, which is also my moon placement. So that's interesting. And kind of the shoving down of emotions is also very that. But at least there's the element of thinking about it, I guess. But in the story there was a lot of pushing down of emotions, and ignoring them completely rather than analyzing them. And I think the ignoring them completely and wanting to pretend they don't exist can be just as Aries energy as acting on them without thinking. His Mercury is in Aries, so energetic, excitable, open to new experiences, potentially impulsive, and passionate, self-oriented. We've already gone over Moon in Aquarius earlier, and then Venus in Taurus. Taurus is also a very good sign for Venus to be in. Like I said, it is in its rulership in Taurus, and that rules not just romance but also art. So it makes sense that he would be a writer if kind of that's his sort of sensibility. And then Mars is in Aquarius. Don't know too much about Mars in Aquarius, to be honest with you, other than maybe like unique, the potential for overthinking. So Aries can sound like a lot, especially when there are multiple placements going on, but it looks a little bit more balanced because of the moon and Mars air sign, and then his rising is Capricorn, which is a I want to say fixed earth sign. So a lot more grounded. There's no water placements in his big six. It just says Jupiter and Neptune, I guess. So not perfectly rounded, but it's at least not, I think, an unhinged amount of fire like we see in Cat and a Hot Tin Roof, I think. I think that it's interesting seeing that his moon is in Aquarius, in particular, and these others, the earth elements, sort of balancing him out too. My, I guess, first impulse, not having read anything really about him in terms of his work, I feel like in some ways this, like, I wonder how much of this work was him kind of meditating on certain potential tendencies in himself in multiple dimensions, because I could see how Aries played out in very different ways for some of the characters when it's really unchecked. And he's also clearly, I think, like in the notes and stuff, you could see that he's trying to say something about people in the sort of predicament that Brick is in, being closeted, being seemingly stuck in not just like a relationship that he doesn't like, but not even really being able to accept or fully look in the eyes like who he is. The kind of struggle of not just being closeted, but being deeply ashamed in a lot of ways. Shame in terms of, like, you can see the sort of homophobia that he exhibits throughout it. That's definitely also self-directed. But one of the things that he talks about is like the when he's asked the reason that he drinks, the main character is a heavy drinker. When he's asked why he drinks, he says it's disgust. And it's disgust. I forget the exact word that he uses, but basically at the, like, lying, like the constant lying that he's around, people lying to themselves about the situations that they're in. And he's the one who's doing that more than almost anyone else in the play. I would say Big Mama is way more deluded than anyone else. But he's close. He's close by in that regard. Even though Brick is kind of our main character, and like I said, with the stage directions and stuff like that, it's clear that Tennessee Williams was trying to talk about a closeted story. It is about much more than that, because he's not the only one who's, like, kind of living in this lie. There's sort of even more of a culture kind of around it, between, like, his dad not even really liking his mom trying to pretend that everything is just perfectly fine, his wife thinking that she can have a successful life with a man that she knows is gay, even more than he knows. So there's a lot. It's very messy. Definitely falls under the category of messy queers. But also just messy, generally speaking. I was really surprised at how well some of this fit. Initially going into the book, I didn't think about the fact that Aries was in fall in Venus. But it definitely makes sense in the way that stuff, like, happens throughout this play. But I also think that while most of the characters, I think, have more overt Aries traits than I do, the sort of tendency that some of them exhibit of, like, trying to ignore stuff in order to fix things is unfortunately very relatable. Something that I personally have worked on and tried to stop doing. Clearly, the folks in the play have not had that particular prerogative at this point in their life. Yeah, there was a lot. Hopefully this comes together cohesively, because I definitely have had thoughts at various points and have talked. So if it's a little choppy, it's because some of the things I'm saying are like 10 minutes apart because I think of stuff intermittently. Good old Pisces Mercury being shitty at communication. But anyways, that's kind of a Hot Tin Roof. I thought it was a really neat character study, and very much see the Aries vibes. I think it was a good pick for it, even though the author isn't an Aries Venus himself. He has a lot of Aries energy, and I think was very tapped into it for this story. I've been told that Streetcar Named Desire also has a similar sort of thing. So I wonder if this is indeed something that he's meditated on quite a bit. And that brings us to my final book for this vlog. Finally, this vlog is probably going to be a multi-parter because I'm editing the stuff together and even taking out some of the extra footage, like outside of kind of the main goal. It's still very still very long, but who's surprised? To be fair, I am reading 6 books, but the final book that I'll be reading is for my Cancer Rising. So the book that I'm going to be reading for my Cancer Rising is going to be Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. I chose this book because it was recommended on multiple lists for Cancers to read. And while I think that a lot of people read or think about horoscopes with their sun sign in mind, a lot of the times it's actually more accurate if you're looking at your rising sign, because that's what a lot of, at the very least when you're looking for like timing horoscopes, your rising sign is like, going to actually be more important than your sun sign. This was just for people to read, so this might not necessarily be that, but regardless, I thought that it made more sense to read it for my rising sign than my Mars sign. This, I believe, starts with the mother figure passing away, and then she's trying to send a message to her sons through this recipe that she has. So there are family secrets that are being so according to the back, it's a novel about betrayals and secrets and the defining power of memory. So it sounds interesting. It's a family saga, multiple perspectives. So I think I'm gonna really like it because I found that I really like a family saga. I've definitely had this for a while. I think this is one of the unread arcs that I carried with me from Tennessee. But I will get started on this soon, and hopefully it's good. So, I finished the audiobook of Black Cake, which I listened to through Spotify. While I did that, I also finished this cute trans heart garland. They kind of look like leaves too, but the leaves they look like kind of look like hearts as well. So like, what can you do? The plan is to use Joanne's yarn, the pride yarn from Joanne's, each of the flags that they have. Put them up on my bookshelves. I have obviously the trans one. I have the non-binary and lesbian one, and I just need to get the bi and pan one and the rainbow one, which, another thing that I crocheted while listening to this, is this little rainbow crop top that I actually started crocheting probably last summer. And I actually also used the Joanne's Pride yarn for this, but this is obviously the rainbow one. I made the majority of it last summer, and then I stopped when I was about here with the straps in this because this takes for fucking ever, and it's where I'm at on this one. I'm also, I actually might have been working on this other one in that clip, because I also technically worked on it too. This hexie cardigan, which it's 2 hexagons sewn together, which is why it's called that. Oh shit, am I undoing it? Yes. Lovely. That's also what I'm doing for this. I did a whole, like, single stitch around everything, and then I'm doing this, but this one is going to be more tricky because I'm doing buttons, and I'm just doing up this one side because that's where the buttons are going to be, but when I get to the other side, I'm going to need to plan where the buttons go and the other stuff, so it's going to take forever. But I don't know, I've been floating between projects, which that's just how it is, generally speaking, on top of just trying out a lot of new stuff. I don't know, I know that I had clips of some of the soft pastel stuff that I did, but I don't know if I showed my process of cross stitching for the first time. I made this cute little guy. He came in a kit and it was just this, but I added the little heart, and that was a lot of fun. But I mostly did this while watching Project Runway, not while reading, which that's also been a large part of what I've been doing. I don't need this big of an update on a vlog this long. Then here I am. I finished Black Cake. It was very good. It's a family saga that is very twisty. And there's a lot to think about in terms of identity, like who a person is or what you know about a person, even if they're so close to you, and also who you are, like in relation to the people around you. So much stuff happens, and I don't really want to talk about too much because I don't want to do spoilers. And I mean, I went into this knowing very little, and I liked that I knew so little and was surprised by a lot. I will say that this is definitely one to check content warnings for, because there's both sides of parental abandonment. There's rape, there's also biphobia, which a couple of the characters are queer, actually, which I did not know about. I went into Black Cake basically off of seeing it on lists. I knew that the show was out, so I've been seeing more about it, and it's a family saga, and every time I read a family saga, I really like it, so I thought I'd give it a go. And it was really great. I think, you know, a lot happened, and you talk to so many people, and that sort of thing could get very confusing very quickly, especially with audiobook, for me personally, at any rate. But I didn't have any problem following it, and I think it's because stuff was clearly labeled in part, but it was really cool. It's also parts of it are also an interesting meditation on culture. Actually, it's really cool to see the stuff that some of the individual characters do and the topics that they're kind of meditating on. And there's a lot in here about food. I mean, the title is Black Cake, so food runs throughout the whole thing in that way, but also there are a couple of sections that more closely look at the idea of food, and like the meaning of indigeneity, the impact of different things worldwide. So it was very interesting, and I enjoyed it. So far as the sign of Cancer is concerned, I know we've already gone over Cancer, but we went over Cancer Mars, and I have notes for Cancer Rising. So, like I've said before, Cancer is our cardinal water sign. So cardinal meaning that it is at the beginning of a season, so it's kind of leadership, starting action. And then water is more centered around emotion. Your rising sign is your first house, and that is regarding your outward demeanor, how people perceive you. And I wrote a little bit about this based off the same books I've been talking about this whole time. The crab has a hard, sometimes sharp outside, but is soft and squishy underneath. So they're defensive and protective of their emotions, but also of the people that they love. They are adaptable, though it can take a while for them to get to know people. Cancers are nurturing and caring towards the ones that they love. They tend to be more sensitive to people and emotions around them, which can overwhelm them. Cancer risings need to learn to put that nurturing force towards themselves as well, and learn how to make and assert personal boundaries. Cancer risings thrive around things and people who make them feel at home. So, that's Cancer rising. And so far as this book and Cancer, I think there's some obvious things that tie it to Cancer. It's kind of mostly surrounding this maternal figure, and Cancers are kind of seen as like mothering. In general, they're the mom friend, but also Cancer is moon ruled, and the moon can also represent the mother. So it just makes sense. It makes sense that it would be around family. And then in terms of like some of the more literal imagery, there's a lot of water in this book. Um, uh, some of the main characters are super into surfing and swimming. Just as well, there are a lot of kind of turbulent emotions that are happening for different people. A lot of people with hard outsides, and you don't really get to know about the squishy middle, I guess. Although, to be perfectly honest, I think that the level of that is highly Scorpio energy. Like, the layers to this. That mom had a heavy Scorpio placement. And this is also coming from someone whose mom has several Scorpio placements. And but I do think that there are some really interesting themes happening about what you show of yourself and how you connect to others. Um, and kind of going towards like I think a message of looking to do that kind of more in some ways that I think could be an important lesson for cancers, or potentially some very sage advice from a mom friend. Um, so there's that as well. It's also interesting speculating about the placements of the particular people in the story. Like, I feel like the sister, Benny, could very well be an Aries. Um, the brother could very well be a Virgo. Or honestly, a Capricorn. Probably a Capricorn. But, yeah, there's a lot to think about. I really love the book. I definitely see why it's recommended for cancers. Um, it was also interesting, like the food part of it, which another thing that like I associate with cancer a lot is it talks about uh, the thing that I wrote mentions things that make you feel at home, um, which relates to other themes in this, but with the sort of like coziness factor. I feel like food is appropriate, though I will say food and home is also a very Taurus energy. Um, so if you're a Taurus who wants to maybe be on the edge of their seat a little bit, I wouldn't say that this is a Taurus story, but there are elements that make me feel like it would be appropriate for them as well. But I could also see this story being compelling to Sagittarians, people with Sagittarius placements, because this takes place over several different continents. I am just keep talking at this point. Long and the short of it is that I like the book. I could see it going for Cancer, but I could also see it going for a lot of other things. But this is the last book in this vlog, which is perfect, because today's the 19th. The Trans Arts Readathon is on the 22nd, and I'm going to be doing a vlog for that. So I get to quit this one, start that one, and hopefully have some time to edit. between the two. So let me know in the comments if you've read any of these, what your thoughts are on them. Let me know about your astrology chart, any books that give you particular zodiac adjacent vibes that you've thought about, a book that you think would be perfect for your sun sign, anything. I'm open. Any conversations about astrology I'm very interested in. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye.